My boss stole my Super Bowl tickets and thought he'd get away with it. I've been a 49ers fan for as long as I can remember. My dad used to talk about Joe Montana like he was a mythological hero. Sundays in our house were sacred. As I got older, the obsession only grew. I became the kind of fan who arrives at the stadium before sunrise, grills in the parking lot, paints his face, and lives for every snap. So when the 49ers made it back to the Super Bowl a few years ago, it felt like my chance to finally witness the dream. At the time, I worked for a consulting firm. It was a decent gig with decent pay. I wasn't some low-level grunt either. I managed a few accounts directly and had built good relationships with my clients. One of those clients stood out from the rest. We clicked right away. He was smart, laid back, and had that rare mix of professionalism and humor. Meetings with him didn't feel like work. We'd often grab drinks afterward and talk about everything from business to football. He knew I was a 49ers lifer. I wore red and gold whenever I could, kept a team flag at my desk, and didn't stop talking about the playoffs. I wasn't subtle about it. So he decided to do something incredible. As a thank you for the work I had done and the friendship we had built, he got his hands on a pair of company Super Bowl tickets. He didn't tell me directly. He gave them to the partner on our account. The plan was to surprise me, only the surprise never came. I watched the Super Bowl from my living room that year. We lost, which hurt, but I still cheered like a maniac. I had no idea I had ever been meant to be there, not a clue. Until a few weeks later, when I met that same client for drinks. He was casual at first. We chatted about work, football, usual stuff. Then he asked, "Why didn't you go to the game? I heard someone else ended up in your seats." I looked at him, completely confused. "What game?" "The Super Bowl," he said. "You didn't go?" "No," I told him. "I didn't have tickets." He blinked. "Wait, what?" He explained that he had passed the tickets to the partner on our account and told him they were for me. It was supposed to be a surprise. He had wanted to thank me in a big way, but I had never received them. I had no idea they even existed. His expression went flat. Then he leaned in and said quietly, "Ask around. Don't stir anything up yet. Just find out what happened and let me know." So I did. I waited until I was back at the office and kept things low-key. It only took a couple of days before one of the secretaries gave me the missing piece. The partner on our account had given the tickets away. Not to me. Not even to someone in our company. He had handed them off to another one of his personal clients as if they were some corporate gift. That was when I stopped being confused. That was when I started getting angry. I sat with that information. For a day, maybe two, I kept thinking about those seats. 30-yard line, Super Bowl, my team on the biggest stage, and how it was all taken from me by someone who probably thought I'd never find out. Under normal circumstances, I might have let it go. Corporate politics can get messy, and sometimes you just eat the loss to avoid shaking the tree. But this wasn't a missing lunch receipt. This was a once-in-a-lifetime moment, ripped away so someone else could look good on my effort. So I didn't confront him. Not directly. I already knew that the client noticed I wasn't there. He brought it up without any prompting, which meant he was paying attention. That gave me an idea. If I played it smart, I could let him handle it. And if it came from him, it would be impossible to ignore. I pulled out my phone and texted the client. I kept it short. "Hey, just wanted to thank you again for thinking of me with those tickets. It looks like they were given to another one of our clients." The response came back in all caps. "Are you kidding me?" Followed by another message. "Pretend I never told you. Let me handle it." At that moment, I knew I had just lit a fuse. A few days later, we got an email from the client's office asking us to attend an in-person meeting. Not unusual. They often asked for quick face-to-face sessions to review progress. The only twist was that they specifically requested that the partner, yes, the same one who had stolen the tickets, be present for the meeting. He didn't seem to think anything of it. We booked the flight, packed our things, and headed down, together. He was relaxed, even joking during the ride. I stayed quiet. He had no idea what was waiting for him. We arrived at the client's office and were ushered into a conference room. Most of the usual team was already there, but one person stood out. A woman in her 30s who neither of us recognized. The client stood up and said, "Dickhead partner, this is Stephanie. She's a VP from one of our other departments. She wanted to sit in on this meeting." Then he turned to her and added, "Hey, you two must already know each other from the Super Bowl." Stephanie smiled politely as she reached out to shake my hand. "Oh, I don't think we met. I'm sorry if I forgot." The client chuckled. "Come on, Steph, how much did you drink? They were sitting right next to you." He looked straight at me. I didn't miss a beat. "Sorry, I wasn't there." "Are you sure you're not thinking of someone else?" Dickhead partner shifted in his chair. His posture changed. His smile started to fade. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Stephanie glanced at him, then casually added, "No, the other seats were taken by those guys from the other company. I was just wondering why they were there. Are we working on something with them?" Silence. She had just named a company that had no connection to our project. They weren't in the same industry. They had no business being at that table. That was when the client turned to him and said, "I gave you those tickets for OP, right?" The partner flushed. His eyes darted around the room. He stammered, "Oh, well, he couldn't make it. So I think he gave them to someone else?" He turned to me, hoping I'd play along. I looked at him calmly. What tickets? The client raised his voice just a little. Those tickets were a personal thank you gift from me to OP. Did you give them to someone else? He paused for a breath. Was it another client? The partner fumbled. Maybe something got mixed up in the office. The room fell quiet. The kind of silence that sucks the oxygen out of the air. The client leaned back in his chair, looked down at his portfolio, calmly gathered his things and said, I think this meeting is over. Then he turned to me. OP, looks like I owe you a thank you gift. Let's go grab lunch. Stephanie, you're welcome to join. Dickhead partner, I need to evaluate our relationship. Please head back home and expect to hear from us next week. Dickhead partner tried to recover. I'd like to come along if that's okay. Stephanie shut him down instantly. I don't think that's a good idea. She motioned for the front desk to show him out. As soon as the elevator doors closed behind him, the entire room burst out laughing. Turns out Stephanie wasn't a VP. She was just another employee the client had asked to play a part in this little show. And she absolutely nailed it. She even came to lunch with us. Huge Niners fan. Hilarious. And that was only the beginning. The moment we stepped out of the building, my phone buzzed. It was Dickhead partner. His message read, We need to talk. You need to cover for the firm. We can figure this out when you get back. I stared at the screen and felt something shift in me. This man had taken what was meant for me, lied to our client, dragged me into his mess, and now had the nerve to ask me to protect him. I showed the message to the client during lunch. He laughed, then leaned in. Don't respond just yet, he said. We're not done. After we wrapped up lunch at a high-end spot, he clearly chose for impact. He laid out what would happen next. He told me exactly what to text the partner in a few hours. Here's what I sent that evening. Hey, the client expects the following. 1. Payment for the resale value of the Super Bowl tickets, not face value. Resale, which was well over $10,000. 2. Full reimbursement for today's lunch, which he deliberately made expensive. 3. A direct personal apology to me. 4. A formal written apology to the client's company, which he described as a response to theft. Lastly, he will never speak to you again. You are no longer welcome on anything involving that account. Silence. For hours. Then a single word. Understood. That was it. By the time we returned to the office, word had already spread. The client had called one of the senior partners and laid out everything. And now, Dickhead partner was scrambling. He tried to spin it. Tried to say it was a misunderstanding. Claimed he thought I had given the tickets away. Said something about logistics being confused, but no one was buying it. The client's version of the story was clear and backed by multiple people, including Stephanie, who provided a written summary of the meeting and the exchange. The other partners were livid. Not just because he jeopardized a key client, but because he had made them look incompetent. He cost them trust, reputation, money. As punishment, they made him pay everything. The tickets, the lunch, the emotional damage control. All of it came directly out of his paycheck. As for me, I came out of it looking clean. I had been professional. I had given the client space to handle it. I hadn't thrown anyone under the bus. I had even offered to go to the meeting with the man who wronged me. That showed restraint, loyalty. But deep down, I was still angry, because the truth was, the damage had already been done. That game was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. I should have been there. I should have seen the opening kickoff, felt the roar of the crowd, lost my voice cheering on every third down. Instead, I watched from my couch, completely unaware that someone else was sitting in my seat, enjoying a moment that was never meant for them. And the person who made that happen still worked one floor above me. After everything blew up, the office felt different. People started treating me with a mix of respect and caution, like I had pulled off some kind of quiet coup. I was no longer just the guy who handled a few accounts. I was the one who stood up to a partner and walked away looking like the only adult in the room. But I wasn't celebrating. Not really. Dickhead partner still had his job. He was embarrassed, sure. He lost access to one of the firm's most important clients. He had to pay out of pocket for what he stole. But he was still walking the halls, still holding meetings, still pretending like nothing had happened. And I had to see him almost every day. He avoided me. Completely. He never apologized. Never made eye contact. Just kept his head down and waited for it all to fade. But it didn't. Not for me. Even though I had won, the place started to feel tainted. I was never going to forget what had happened. I couldn't sit in meetings and pretend like I trusted the leadership anymore. And honestly, I started wondering what kind of future I had at a firm where someone like that could pull a stunt like this and still hold his title. So I started looking. Quietly, I put out feelers, talked to friends, reached out to some old contacts. I wasn't in a rush, but I was ready. A few months later, an opportunity came up. A better position. Higher pay, healthier culture. No internal politics, no inflated egos, and no snakes in suits pretending to have my back. I gave my notice without drama. There was no big speech, no fireworks. Just a simple email thanking the firm for the experience and outlining my transition plan. As I packed up my things on the last day, I ran into one of the other partners, the one who had to clean up after the Super Bowl mess. He shook my hand and said, You handled yourself well. I hope the new place treats you better. That was the only real acknowledgement I ever got. And honestly, it was enough. I walked out of that office for the last time, feeling like I had finally closed the door on the whole mess. I had taken the high road, but I hadn't let myself be stepped on. I had played it smart, and I had come out stronger. As for the client, he stayed in touch. We'd still grab drinks every now and then. He even mentioned that he eventually cut ties with the firm entirely. Said it just didn't feel right working with them anymore. He now works with a close friend of mine at a competing firm, and from what I hear, they're doing great together. To this day, I still get a little bitter when Super Bowl season rolls around. I think about what could have been, what should have been, and how one person's selfishness stole that moment from me. But I also think about how I turned it around, how I exposed him without ever raising my voice, how I didn't let anger ruin my judgment, and how in the end, I made sure the right people saw what really happened. I still haven't been to a Super Bowl in person. I'm hoping the Niners make another run soon. When they do, I'll be there. And this time, no one is taking my seat.
You've heard the case. While you consider your verdict, the court calls the next case to order.
Stepdad betrayed my mom, so we took everything from him. When my mom, a 50-year-old woman who had already survived a 25-year marriage to my manipulative biological father, finally filed for divorce, it felt like a long overdue breath of fresh air. I, 24M, had just moved back in with her to help out and get back on my feet. After everything she had been through, I was just hoping she'd find peace again. Not long after I settled in, she introduced us to her new boyfriend, Chris, a 45-year-old man with a checkered past. He had been an inmate at the county jail where my mom worked as a correctional officer. He was in for a DUI, which, in hindsight, should have been the first red flag. But after what my mom had endured in her marriage, I didn't want to judge. She seemed happy for the first time in years, and that was enough for me. Chris was rough, around the edges, but he made an effort, at least at first. My 30-year-old sister and 23-year-old brother moved in with us too. We were a full house, but for a while, things felt surprisingly okay. Chris and I even bonded over video games. There were still awkward moments, like the fact that he never really addressed his past or future seriously, but we let it slide. We wanted to believe that Mom had finally found someone decent. Unfortunately, the illusion didn't last. Things started to unravel in 2017. Chris, with that DUI still hanging over his record, had to check in regularly at the courthouse as part of his probation. One day, he left for his appointment like usual, but never came back. Hours passed. No texts, no calls. We started to worry something had happened. Then finally, the phone rang. It was Chris, calling from Texas. Apparently, the FBI had been waiting for him. Turns out Chris's family down in Texas was neck-deep in gang activity and drug trafficking. And thanks to one unlucky moment, when Chris had been in a car during a drug handoff, he was now tied to their crimes. His way out? Flip on his family. He made a deal to testify in exchange for a shorter sentence and was released temporarily before the trial. My mom was devastated. She had believed in him, put her reputation on the line for him, and now she was stuck trying to make sense of this chaos. But somehow, during all those emotional phone calls over the next year, they patched things up. They even started planning a wedding for when he got out. The owner of the DQ where he used to work even promised to give him his manager job back. It seemed like we were heading into a new chapter. But as soon as Chris came back, the cracks started to show again. The moment Chris returned, the drinking started, and not just the casual kind. We're talking half a 24-pack of beer a day. It was obvious that Chris, the same 45-year-old man who had already done time for a DUI, hadn't learned a damn thing. And when he drank, he wasn't just loud, he was cruel. The kind of drunk who picked fights over nothing and lashed out with words that cut deep. While he never laid a hand on my mom, his verbal abuse left scars that didn't fade easily. But Mom, still holding on to the hope that things might work out, kept making excuses for him. She told us the stress of work, the upcoming trial, and everything from his past was weighing him down. She wanted to believe that the man she defended through all that legal hell could still be saved. Years passed like that. Tension, fights, apologies that meant nothing. Until one night, he came home completely wasted, stumbling through the door like nothing was wrong. That was the final straw. My mom, tired, hurt, and finally done, confronted him right there. When she asked if he had been drinking and he didn't even bother denying it, she told him to get out. No yelling, no drama, just firm, cold, and final. He left to stay with a friend. The next morning, Mom asked us to help pack up a few of his essentials, clothes, toiletries, whatever he'd need, so he wouldn't have to set foot in the house again until he was sober. We thought we were just helping her close a painful chapter. We had no idea what bomb was about to drop next. As we were packing up Chris's stuff, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw someone I hadn't expected. Betty, a 25-year-old woman who had gone to high school with me and now worked with Chris. She looked nervous, like she was about to confess to a crime. My mom sat down across from her and Betty got right to it. She made Mom promise not to say where the information came from, and then she dropped a bombshell. Chris had been cheating, not just emotionally, He'd been having sex with another woman, Darla, a woman in her early 40s, in and around the DQ where he worked. Betty had walked in on them more than once. When she threatened to say something, Chris told her he'd fire her if she ever opened her mouth. He was the store manager, after all. And the worst part? Darla was pregnant. My mom went quiet, completely still. You could almost hear the rage building under her skin. She didn't scream or cry. She just stood up, looked at us, and calmly said, "Get everything of his, everything. It's going in the alley." We didn't hesitate. Every last item Chris owned, his clothes, electronics, even his video game collection, was dumped in the alley behind our house. Legally, there were no issues. The house was rented in my mom's name only. He had no rights to it. Then she called him, confronted him, and Chris didn't even try to lie. He admitted to the affair, said he was glad Darla was pregnant because he'd finally have a child of his own, something my mom couldn't give him due to health risks from past pregnancies. He refused to apologize. She arranged for him to pick up his trash, his belongings, with a police escort. That should have been the end of the story. But we weren't done. My mom wanted to move on, to be done with Chris and erase him from her life. But my 30-year-old sister, 23-year-old brother, and I, we weren't so forgiving. He didn't just cheat. He humiliated her. He threatened her peace. And we weren't about to let that slide. First stop? His workplace. DQ franchises are often independently owned, and the one Chris managed was no exception. We knew the owner. He operated several stores in the area and had always been decent to our family. We gave him the full story. Chris was abusing his position as manager, allowing sexual acts to take place on the premises and threatening coworkers to keep quiet. The owner didn't even blink. Chris was fired, banned from every location the owner controlled, and in a poetic twist, Betty, the one who told us the truth, got promoted and now runs that branch like a pro. But Chris didn't stay unemployed for long. We heard he had moved in with Darla in a town an hour away and had started working at another DQ there. So we made a second call. This time, it wasn't as easy. There weren't any recorded infractions at the new store, so they couldn't just fire him on hearsay. But we were persistent. We warned them, followed up, and after a while, whether from pressure or Chris screwing up again, he lost that job too. We thought that might finally be the end of it. Then he started driving around our neighborhood. Same car, same shady behavior. Watching the house, circling. It was creepy as hell. But here's the kicker. He didn't even have a license. Remember that DUI? He was still on probation. Technically, he wasn't allowed to drive at all. But there he was, behind the wheel of Darla's car, stalking our street like we wouldn't notice. We called the police, reported the car, told them who he was and what he was doing, gave them everything they needed to pull him over. A few weeks later, we got the call. Chris had been caught, driving drunk with no license. Again. But that wasn't the only thing they found. The police had enough reason to dig deeper after the DUI arrest, and when they searched the house Chris was staying in with Darla, they found something that sealed his fate. Guns. Several of them. Chris, as a convicted felon, wasn't even allowed to be near firearms, let alone living in a home that had them. That violation alone meant more jail time. But add that to driving under the influence, driving without a license and probation violation, and suddenly Chris was headed straight back to jail. And the timing? Couldn't have been better. Just as he finished serving time locally, the clock ran out on his freedom deal in Texas. Remember the plea agreement that let him walk free while waiting to testify against his gang-affiliated family? Well, it was time to pay the rest of that sentence. They shipped him back to Texas to finish what he owed. Meanwhile, Darla gave birth to his child. While Chris rotted in a prison cell, Darla apparently had her own moment of clarity. Maybe she saw the same controlling, manipulative side of him that we all knew too well. Because shortly after the baby was born, she cut all ties with him. That should have been rock bottom for Chris. But instead of reflecting on what he did, he started sending letters, tons of them, pages and pages of apologies, rants, pity stories, all addressed to my mom. Some lines begged her to take him back. Others screamed that none of this was his fault. And then, right after those lines, he'd claim to love her still. It was pathetic. My mom never even opened most of them. She'd grab the stack from the mailbox, walk straight to the backyard fire pit, and burn them. Chris had become nothing more than ashes in our past. After everything, the betrayal, the lies, the arrests, we finally moved on. My mom, still the strongest 50-year-old woman I've ever known, packed up her life and relocated out of state. She bought a new home, one we've been slowly renovating together. I still live with her, not because I have to, but because I want to help her build something peaceful, something that's hers alone. My brother found a great job and moved out. My sister got engaged and finally seems genuinely happy. We all started new chapters away from the damage Chris had left behind. As for Chris, he eventually got out of prison. Last we heard, he was living in Kansas, broke, bitter, and fighting tooth and nail to avoid paying child support, which Darla rightfully sued him for. No job, no respect, no family, just letters that never got read and bridges he burned on. His own. Looking back, I don't regret any of it. We didn't ruin his life. He did that all by himself. All we did was make sure the fallout caught up to him, and that my mom never had to pay the price for someone else's mistakes again.
The case has been heard. The stories have been told. Now it's your turn to judge. Leave your verdict in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. The Court of Stories is always in session.